Living up to the title of this video, Sacrion's Castle of Forgotten Heroes level 5 might just be the hardest dungeon in Summoner's War that nobody's talking about. So let's fix that and also make more progress towards the ongoing Dimension Hole Dungeon Guide series that I've been running on the channel. Welcome to the starter guide for Sacrion's level 5 rune dungeon. Before we get into the team that we're going to talk about today, let's talk about why you'd want to farm the dungeon in the first place. Just like all of the other Dimension Hole guides, the reason why you'd want to farm this one is for those ancient runes, grinds, and gems. And those ancient runes have a higher minimum base value for substats. So that means they also have a potentially higher maximum too. Sacrion is home to the Despair sets, Blade, Revenge, and Fight runes. I realize I left out Focus. Maybe I got beef with accuracy resistance right now. Did I just forget it? Or do I have bias against it? You'll never know. Each dimension has its own gimmick just to enter the door to the dungeon. Like, you gotta take your shoes off and all that. It's like, come on, man, be respectful. Don't be dragging dirt and mud through my house. Before you can even enter the dungeon, you need to compose a team of different elements. So that means that we've got some choices to make. You can't have both Verd and Rogue. You can't do both Fran and Lauren, which sucks. This is like one of the few times where having choices is actually way worse. Like, I'd rather just not have to deal with this. But that's okay, because we're gonna work around it. Also, the boss is gonna start out as the light attribute, but at the beginning of each phase, he's gonna change his element. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's get into the dungeon. The team that we're going to be talking about today starts off with a very strong leader in Veramos the Dark Ifrit. He offers a 33% global HP lead, and he's gonna be runed like we have him runed for the other dungeons in Kairos, meaning Rage. We want this guy to do damage. We're gonna rune him on speed, crit damage, HP. The HP is there to make sure that he sticks around long enough to keep doing damage, but make sure to prioritize crit rate as well as crit damage, because one does practically nothing without the other. Veramos is also great because his passive is going to remove defense break as it comes up on your team. And you're gonna find that occasional stun on skill 2 can help out a lot. In fact, it's part of the reason why we're able to focus the boss with this team. Because normally as the boss's minions would be giving you trouble, Veramos might actually be able to keep them stunned. Or in the very worst case, he'll reduce their attack bar. Next, Second Awakened Darien, the Light Vagabond. Now, I know what you're thinking. Darien reduces damage, and the boss has an ability that says that it ignores damage reduction effects. Well, it would actually be more appropriate to say that the boss has an ability that ignores damage reduction effects that are part of beneficial effects. So that means invincibility, shield buff, etc., but not damage reduction on a passive effect. I know it's a little confusing, but it's palpable when you're in there. You will notice that it is having an effect. So Darien is actually more than just a passive with legs for this team. In fact, we're also bringing him because he has defense break on skill 1. When it comes to runes for Darien, you're ultimately just going to want to put him on whatever gets him the most HP. So that could be triple energy sets, HP on your 2, 4, 6 slots. Although you may be incentivized to rune him to be the fastest on your team, so that way he can set up that defense break and facilitate the damage from your DPS units. So it wouldn't necessarily be wrong to go speed HP, or just to find some speed in the substats. But if you just want him to tank, that's totally okay too. There's one more unit on this team that's going to be applying defense break, so stay tuned for that. You can always look for more HP in the artifacts too. Moving on to our next primary damage dealer, it's Kaki, the Fire Onimusha. Now, Kaki is not exactly farmable, but at the time of recording, we just had a 10th anniversary event that gives people a ton of scrolls. Hopefully you got one. If you didn't get one, there are other ways to come about a Kaki. One way to do so is in a Choose a Nat 4 event, and if you happen to be a new player, there is one open in the Summoner's Way questline, although you should probably pick Tyron with that. And if you're missing Kaki still, we'll talk about some reasonable substitutes, though I wouldn't necessarily focus on this dungeon right from the start. Whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze, that's a conversation we're not gonna have here. We can talk about that in the comments. But before we get to those alternatives to Kaki, let's just talk about Kaki. Kaki deals more damage based on his defense, and at the start of combat, he increases his defense proportionate to his attack power. So that means if you rune him on a ton of attack and a bunch of defense, you're gonna be getting way more mileage out of those stats than other monsters would. We're going to be runing him on Violent. Heck, we're going to put him on Attack. Will we look for defense in the subs? Absolutely. Are we also going to check for speed? Oh, you know it. What's great about Kaki too is that he's incapable of critting, so that means you don't need to worry about crit rate. You don't need to worry about crit damage. Like, this guy's fairly easy to rune, and again, you get great results from him. He also has defense break on skill 1, and he heals himself for a portion of the damage dealt. But one thing that I just want to re-emphasize is that even though he doesn't need to move first on the team, you don't want him to necessarily be slow. So if you can't get him to around like 75, 80-ish additional speed just through substats alone, you can do speed attack on your 2-4-6 slots if you need to. But in the gameplay that you're seeing behind me, he is on attack, just as a heads up. The last member of the team is Riley the Wind Totemist. Riley is a fusible 5-star who offers immense healing. 75% of her 4 skills heal. And that's exactly what we need. She also has attack buff to make sure that we're doing all that damage. In fact, because Riley gives such consistent access to attack buff, it might actually be beneficial to look for a particular substat in your artifacts for Kaki. It's the attack up effect bonus. That's going to make you do even more damage when you have attack buff applied. Riley is also going to be ruined on Violent, and we're going to be putting her on Speed, HP. Your biggest priorities with her are just that she's fast and tanky. If she's the fastest on the team, even ahead of Darien, that's great. She can apply attack buff, then Darien can set up defense break, then Veramos and Kaki can go right after that. So that's the full team, and it's a pretty consistent one too. I was able to get several times 30 runs fully complete with no fails. So ideally, if you have Kaki, you should use him. He really thrives here. But if you need a replacement, you could try a few other options, such as Second Awakened Vigor. Second Awakened Vigor has a 3rd skill that applies a 3-turn defense break, and he has a little more healing with a speed buff and anti-crit on skill 2. Now, it's a little bit harder to out-sustain the boss because he permanently gains attack power whenever he gains turns. But if your Vigor has enough damage and you're able to circumvent the attack buff and the defense buff that the Megan put on in phase 1, you actually might be able to clear with him. Alternatively, some people have used Second Awakened Spectra to great effect as well. For Spectra, you're just going to really want to make sure that he's got enough crit rate and crit damage to just take the boss down when he gets his turn. And then you'll really just need Veramos to cover the portion when the boss inevitably turns blue. But again, if you've got Kaki, he is the way. And that's the team for Sacrion, but let me know if you have a team that you love to use in the comments down below. We have one more dungeon left, and it's Alunia, so I'll see you back here for the next one. Bye, everybody.